World peace. Looking now at wrong attitude, we know that the scientific community, astronomers, mathematicians, physicists and scholars all take the attitude that this minute blue speck, our planet Earth, is the only inhabited point in the infinite vastness of creation, involving millions and millions of galaxies, suns and planets. Here, on this small rock, we are first of all an insignificant point in the Milky Way, a galaxy comprising billions of suns, some of gigantic size. And then again, our galaxy is only one of millions of other more expansive galaxies or sun clusters. We also know that earlier scientific schools viewed this vast universe of celestial bodies as all turning around our minute Earth, imagining that we were its center. Certainly, to the evidence of our 5 physical senses, it seems as if the sun revolves round and around this Earth, along with all the hosts of heaven, all constellations, galaxies, and all of the innumerable suns which compose them. When it was discovered, however, that the Earth, by its own rotation, makes it appear that the heavens turn around us and that our sun rises and sets, the idea was treated with contempt and hatred. People said and felt that we, on this planet, are the most important thing, and that all the rest, all the stars, serve our purpose. Is this egotism, the wrong attitude? Is it perhaps a remarkable form of conceit and vanity? Even now, there are those in the academic community who scoff at the possibility of intelligent life existing, save on this speck of dust we call our Earth. This seems an extraordinary vanity, a lack of understanding of our own relative importance, and there seems little credible sign of this attitude changing because of fear of the unknown. As Gene Roddenberry phrased it, we comprehend only life as we know it. Imagining that we are the only real living thing in the inconceivable vastness of creation which awaits us to develop the technology to exploit it. This work, on the other hand, teaches that the whole of creation is a living organism and that we are almost insignificant, virtually unimportant. That if our planet blew up, it would not be noticed or scarcely make any difference in the grand scale of things. Students of work on the self say they are not interested in cosmic diagrams such as the ray of creation, although the psychological teaching appears interesting. This work, however, like all esoteric teaching, connects mankind with the universe in which we appear. To study humanity by itself, apart from the universe, is erroneous and cannot give the right emotions. A human is a microcosm, some minute world, representing in itself the macrocosm, or great universe, where one is modelled after the other. They are in correspondence, and nothing is in us that is not in the universe. Then, just as the sun is greater than the earth, and the earth is greater than the moon, so are there psychological levels, lower and higher, lesser and greater in mankind, representing moon, earth and sun, corresponding internally with these external sense-seen beings we know as moon, earth and sun. We know from what is taught, and perhaps know through self-observation, that pride and vanity are 2 giants that keep us asleep, that walk in front of us always, deciding everything beforehand. Here, notice an individual who admires themselves and ask yourself, are they asleep? Suppose that you are one who is scientifically convinced that only this Earth is peopled, and that the rest of the universe consists of dead matter, some natural resource awaiting only our discovery and exploitation. Will this help you to deal with those formidable giants that actually take charge of your every move and ruin everything? I fail to see what this standpoint can do other than swell up our illusions of self-importance, sustaining the unreal side of us through the filter of false personality, which characterizes our present level of being. Sometimes, however, we stop and gaze up at the stars, and we feel our own insignificance. Science and mathematics should have increased this sense of wonder. Regrettably, it has done the reverse. It has no message at present, save that everything is meaningless, and we have evolved into the weapons of massive waste and consumption that we see around us everywhere. This decrease in meaning, and therefore understanding, is noticeable on all sides, which results in the loss of a certain emotional intelligence necessary for humankind, so that our development becomes balanced and synchronous with our environment. We can call such emotions what names we choose. However, they all have the effect of making humanity feel that they are a very small creature indeed, which opens us internally to the potential action of higher centers constantly seeking to send messages of guidance. Hence, machines are given the opportunity to make war on us, and the next war is already arising from new machines, of which we can catch a glimpse already. Humanity, with its characteristic violence, its lack of understanding and self-observation, is already busied with new destructive technology, and at the same time attending conferences to solicit peace and cooperation. This is a lack of consciousness by those incapable of seeing the contradictions within themselves. This incapability, the lack of consciousness, is one of the signs of our collective level of being. The objective of work, of all esoteric teaching, is to increase consciousness, which begins by seeing what you are like for yourself, penetrating the dark side within you that lies beyond the pretense of false personality. This is the first point, namely that with our present lack of consciousness, with our present level of being, it is impossible to stop war. Only through an increase in consciousness can war be stopped. Our level of being attracts our life, and so humanity attracts war. This work teaches that man cannot do, that everything happens in the only possible way that it can happen. Everything is going to go in the only way that it can go, and nothing can prevent it. However, one thing must be added. If mankind awoke from slumber, then everything would go differently for us. Why? Because if people began to see, to awaken, and to become more conscious, then their level of being would change, and so another order of things would be attracted by them, which means that war and many other things we see around us today would cease. If mankind lived on a higher level of itself, then everything would change. One outcome would be that we'd cease to be so violent, because we would overcome our own violence. Sleeping humanity on this earth is used for just that purpose. The suffering, pain, illness, violence, the killing, hatred, bigotry, revenge, and fundamentalism are being used for certain purposes by something outside of this earth. An individual can, however, escape from that through certain kinds of useful suffering that awaken them, which will be covered in more depth later. Our general level of being is characterized by lying, and this makes any real agreement between us impossible. P.D. Ouspensky once said that we should set aside time to study lying in all of its forms, our own lying and lying in general. He said we really need instruction on the subject of lying. We need to realize and study lying due to its terrific power over us. Ouspensky remarked that the formatory part of our cognitive sense, from one perspective, could be thought of as being given us to lie with. Hence, how can we get anything right if we and everyone else lie constantly? Lying characterizes our level of being, and so it is one of the things which must change if our level of being is ever to be changed. Nothing is what it pretends to be. Begin with yourself. Are you really what you pretend to be? Seriously, do you think so? Again, look at a peacock strutting, a bull entering a field full of cows. Is it all a lie? Then look at yourself. All propaganda is organized lying. There is a public relations manager within all of us, continually selling a narrative. Officialdom is packed with lies from top to bottom. All politics is based upon lying, and not necessarily clever at that. Whenever one speaks, one lies, usually because self-promotion, self-justification is the game, where conscious self assists in the self-promotion effort. Rob Kurzban writes in his book on the modular view of the mind, which does not include the self modules that are the bits and pieces of our self, conscious self is largely in the public relations business. Anthony Greenwald, in his book on the totalitarian ego, writes of fabrication and the revision of personal history. He uses the phrase benefactance, perception of responsibility for desired but not undesired outcomes. Beneficial because we like to present ourselves as being beneficial to others. Effective because we like to present ourselves as capable and competent to others. When it comes to any skill, most people will describe themselves as being above average. If, however, you do the math, most people cannot be above average. This can be seen in the way that we naturally interpret negative outcomes. There is a way that we explain negative outcomes as being due to factors other than ourselves, being due to bad luck or to some other external factors. Interestingly, we don't notice the bad luck that other people have. When we assess how much we contributed to team efforts, we do the same thing. People claim more credit for the outcome than is practically possible. Most people believe that they do more good things than the average person and fewer bad things. So we more often than not believe that we are more morally upstanding than we actually are. Selective retention, the way our memory filters out certain unfavorable things, retaining only the more favorable. Remembering pride and shame, self-enhancement and the phenomenology of autobiographical memory. Martin van Linden writes in his book that people's self-images are grounded in autobiographical memories. His study shows that the positive events we remember in greater detail than any negative events. All negative events are not reflected so well in the retelling as our positive ones. Where it comes to other people, however, it works the opposite way, as we remember mostly the negative things that they do and not so much of the positive. People are aware of these biases, but much more so in others. See the bias blind spot, Perceptions of Bias in Self versus Others, compiled by Emily Pronin, Daniel Y. Lin, and Lee Ross. Their study suggests that individuals see the existence and operation of cognitive and motivational biases much more so in others than in themselves. We lack a very objective perception of ourselves and any of the things that happen to us. It is possible to argue that the primary evolutionary function of the self is to be the organ of impression management, rather than, as folk psychology would have it, the decision maker. See Jerome Garko, published in 1989. Of all the illusions that Buddhism emphasizes, there are none more prominent than the illusions about the self. Two themes are illustrated here: the author of our actions over time, symbolizing control, being in charge of our actions, and persistence through time, symbolizing some coherent being that persists over time. The Buddha emphasized that if we think that things are under control, then take a look, they are not. If you think that there is this self that persists through time, then why is there that flux and impermanence within this thing that constitutes the self? Two of the aspects that are most deeply embedded in this concept of the self, namely control and persistence coherent through time, are illusions, because there is no single author of our actions. Even to say I is lying. For which I do we actually mean? The one who wants pizza? No, wait a minute. Some pie sounds good. Hang on, there's lasagna in the refrigerator. I think I'll just order in some Chinese. The whole apparatus for lying, the machinery for its propaganda, has been enormously increased for us through social media and technology. What is the media used for? It has been extensively and often only used for the propaganda of lies, to sell someone's narrative. Imagine how much work would have to be done, what effort would be needed to make humanity able to see through propaganda, printed media, movies and music, reality TV, sports, radio, podcasts and the internet, then resist their lies. People let their very souls become absorbed into media about imaginary people and imaginary life. It is all lies. It is a good thing, however, to resist a presentation by not identifying with it. Then the strange force working on imagination does not eat you alive. A great many things could be added here about lying, such as that all negative states are due to lies and produce only lies. Lastly, we forget very easily how fallible is human memory. People forget what things were like once. New generations are also growing up. This makes new conflict possible. If we were all more conscious, then war would cease. However, that is impossible, because it is impossible for everyone to be more conscious. As quite simply, it is a matter of the greatest difficulty for just one person to become more conscious. Notice how all people who have taken momentary control of the world base themselves on war. All the Hasnamas, Hitler and Mussolini types, those whose well-being depends upon the ill-being of others, all dictators ground themselves on war. It demonstrates how deeply man's level of being attracts war, and how the disease of war is in man, due largely to his own state. Since man's level of being is the same as it was, then everything will go in the only possible way in which it can go, at that level, and no one will be able to do anything. George Gurdjieff once said, "Everything is being done in the only way it can be done. If one thing could be different, then everything could be different. And then perhaps there would be no war. Everything is dependent upon everything else. Everything is connected, and nothing is separate. Therefore, everything is going in the only way it can go. If people were different, then everything would be different. They are what they are, so everything is just as it is."